Thank you, Arcade1Up.
VideoGameVegas.
He's so cute.
Friends, VideoGameVegas. And this is a thank you to you, Arcade1Up. You created a product concept that sparked an idea in me I never thought possible. Having an actual arcade in my house. I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank the other key component to your company's success. The community who's bonded over your concept. If it weren't for them, and I'm not including those who thrive in the intentional toxic or those disingenuous, but to the upstanding folks who have supported your vision financially through their thoughtful, honest, and sometimes critical messaging, their time, and some through their ingenuity and inventions to make this dream of reliving a wonderful time in our youth a reality. But this thank you also comes with a plea. And Arcade1Up, please avoid any ill treatment or attempted silencing of the good folks who make effort to back you. Even if you disagree with their direction or feedback at times, there's no need for petty or unprincipled behavior. Remember, we are not just numbers on a financial sheet, and are a pivotal ingredient to Arcade1Up's success. Before Arcade1Up came along, I was mostly content to play classic arcade games at home on a single, nondescript emulation arcade cabinet I got from a company called Hanaho Games. Their cabinet had a standard generic control setup, consisting of 2 joysticks with 6 action buttons on each side. Well, actually 7 action buttons on each side on the one I got, with an extra button mimicking placement for Neo Geo play. It also required a separate PC, not included, and I had to install and configure all the necessary software myself to make it run. This arduous process helped me understand what it meant by educational purposes, as it took real knowledge and practice to get things working correctly. The Hanaho Cabinet was also incredibly big and heavy, because it was made of the same materials and about the same size as a commercial-grade arcade cabinet, replete with a big CRT monitor. But since I planned to only have one arcade machine in my home, a dream of mine since I was a kid, that was fine. It could play most of the games I wanted, but there was always that feeling of something missing. As time went on, I eventually found myself wanting more, and decided to dip my toe into commissioning a custom-made arcade emulation cabinet that could expand my experience. There were several to choose from, but the one that stood out most for me was from a company called Dream Home Arcades, now known as Extreme Home Arcades. I liked their advertised concept, machines that would be plug and play, no putting them together, and no messing around with software configurations and all that. Customized to one's liking, look and design, and could include just about every control scheme you can imagine. I chose their tabletop model with a trackball, push-pull spinners, light guns, a Tron joystick, both their 4-way and 8-way joysticks, some side pinball flipper buttons, and many other control methods to get the most robust experience on a single cabinet. It all sounded great on paper, but it ended up a total disaster. Out of the box, or should I say, out of the crate, though a tabletop version, that baby was huge and heavy. Turning on my Dream Home Arcades machine for the first time, I couldn't even play a game. I had to work with the company over the phone just to get it to function, reseating parts and stuff, and little did I know, I'd have to repeat a similar process pretty much every time I turned it on. And then I could only play for a short time, usually around 5 to 10 minutes, before the machine would randomly fault back to a generic Windows desktop right in the middle of play, and wouldn't let me get back to the games even with the provided icon to relaunch everything. The only way I could get back into the action was to restart the machine, and this sometimes involved reseating one or both hard drives when things wouldn't work after turning it back on. And getting booted back to a Windows desktop would also happen if I chose to launch more than 3 games in a session as well, though I was able, on some occasions, to launch 1 or 2 more, even up to 6 games on 2 different occasions that I can recall, before it crashed back to a desktop. The machine had over a claimed supported 50,000 games, so you can imagine just how frustrating this was. After working with Dream Home Arcades, aka Extreme Home Arcades, for months, and spending more time tinkering and trying to fix their machine more than playing games, and receiving repeated messaging from them like, "We don't see these types of issues, and we've sold a lot of these," or being told many times, "We can send out replacement parts if need be, but try this now," I finally had to step back and do some soul searching. What was I doing? And why did I buy the machine in the first place? I bought it to play games, and I definitely wasn't doing much of that. I eventually realized their angle of a just plug-and-play machine was just words in a sales pitch and not indicative of the actual product. They knew how to make a great cabinet shell with some quality control methods, and were very courteous and professional with me. But they knew very little about the software they used, as seemingly simple questions couldn't be answered, or issues related to software couldn't be resolved. Like some of the control configurations they set up that didn't work, and after they were stumped, expected me to figure it out. But most concernedly, of course, my unit exhibited all the behaviors of having faulty PC parts. With the no end in sight troubleshooting, and the simple fact I wasn't having fun anymore, even dreading turning on the machine, my well-being went downhill. I finally got to the point where I was no longer willing to compromise that, and decided to make the painful and hard decision to cut my losses, giving up on the Dream Home Arcades machine, which wasn't easy, as the whole thing cost me well over $4,000. I sought out others who bought machines from Dream Home/Extreme Home Arcades beyond the testimonials on their site, and found out that others had similar issues and bad experiences as I did. Not all, mind you, but enough to cause concern. This helped me know I made the right decision for me, giving up on the Dream Extreme product, and begrudgingly going back to my generic Hanaho Cabinet and resign myself to playing arcade games that way again, and on the occasional console as well. But eventually, and unexpectedly, a light came out of that darkness. A company called Arcade1Up came into being, offering a concept of smaller and lighter form-factor arcade machines, fashioned after their bigger brother brethren, plug and play, well, after you put them together, licensed, and at a consumer-friendly price. I never thought anything like that would ever happen, and the idea of what was possible with arcade gaming at home expanded for me. No longer was I just imagining that one perfect arcade cabinet with all the control schemes that can play all my favorite games correctly, but now to the possibility of reliving a full arcade experience, one with multiple machines in a room, each with their own unique art and controls. Finally, a company who seemed to realize an untapped market, targeting an audience of adult gamers who used to spend countless hours in quarters at their local arcades when they were younger. Not necessarily to those firmly set to playing on original commercial hardware, mind you, though I'm sure some of them might find fun with these smaller guys. But to those who didn't have the space, upkeep savvy, aversion to additional heft, or sometimes budget, for original hardware, but still wanted to feel that same feeling of playing in an arcade again. Arcade1Up's marketing focus was clear from the beginning, with one of their first promos featuring Justin Wong and Martin Fan, 2 professional Capcom Street Fighter players gaming on an Arcade1Up Street Fighter II Championship Edition cabinet, endorsing it. And I also love the brilliance of their first TV commercial, answering a seemingly difficult question: how am I going to convince the wife to let me bring arcade machines into the home? The commercial shows a flashback of a guy going into an arcade back in the day to enjoy some video games, and then flash forwards to today, where he has a couple of Arcade1Up machines in his home and enjoying them with his wife and son, providing the solution: hey, these machines could be a great bonding experience for us and the kids. Wink, wink. So clever. It looked like I would finally get something bigger than the handheld arcade replicas I also collected throughout the years, with artwork that mimicked what I remembered from the arcade, now with full-sized and unique controls tailored to play the games as they were meant to. A true arcade experience anytime I wanted at home. But would Arcade1Up's concept turn out as good as the hype? Well, here and there. And not without a little help from my Glen's Retro Show, that is. And I do hope the folks over at Arcade1Up truly appreciate and understand the important role Glen played in the progression of your company. If it wasn't for Glen's significant hardware innovations, especially his first one, with his true arcade spinner, my first Arcade1Up purchase would have been my last. Glen provided that safety net that many of us relied on when we took a chance on an Arcade1Up purchase. And I'm sure Arcade1Up found benefit in their own products, not to mention the word spread about their company due to Glen's contributions. Now, I've enjoyed many of your cabinets over the years, but there's no way to get around it. The respect and reverence these classics deserve haven't always translated acceptably to their Arcade1Up releases. And for this, Arcade1Up definitely owes a debt of gratitude to folks like Glen and other third-party contributors and the upstanding folks in the community for showing that it's worth providing quality and that it doesn't have to break the bank to do it. Arcade1Up has a long road ahead in the areas of consistent quality, transparent and truthful communication, customer support, and future support for these cabinets via Arcade1Up replacement parts we need. But the appreciation is still there for Arcade1Up's ingenuity, coming up with a brilliant concept and setting off to make it a reality. And a huge thank you, Arcade1Up, for Atari Star Wars. And I must preface your first Star Wars release, as I haven't purchased your new edition, and it would be unfair for me to comment on that one. When your company first came onto the scene, you welcomed me to submit my ideas for future cabinets. My first submission requested an original Atari Star Wars arcade machine with games Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi with a true yoke controller. Now, I'm not claiming that my submission made it happen, but I'm sure you received many requests for this, and I'm glad it became a reality. And boy, did you deliver. Seriously, you did the fans right with this one and showed true respect for the cabinet and property. I now have my favorite arcade game of all time in my house, and with great quality. My future hope for you, Arcade1Up, is to strive to get back to the quality of your Star Wars cabinet and build that kind of excellence again and never look back. Forgo, or at least put secondary, trivial enhancements like included stools, tin signs, light-up deck protectors, and faux plastic coin doors, and instead, concentrate on the things that really matter. The game experience itself. Make sure the games function the way that they should, which may include rigorous testing by the right people who really know the games, so that everything looks, sounds, and plays as one who loves these titles would expect each time they turn on the machine, and for the life of the machine, a long life preferably, and without the need for any updates. Include quality monitors, speakers, and the right computer parts to make everything run correctly and smoothly. Include quality controls and the right simulated controls on every cabinet, and live up to that real feel moniker you often trumpet. Putting emphasis to the right equipment and acceptable durability can only lead to less parts to replace, and how often. Make sure the cabinet itself is aesthetically pleasing in every way, and that all parts are packed well, so nothing is damaged out of the box, and the artwork is of high caliber, which you've proven to produce on many of your cabinets. Also, if the cabinet comes with a light-up marquee, make sure it's as great as the best ones you've made effort on. Quality is the repeated factor here for all these points. You prove quality in each of these areas at some point, but unfortunately, rarely all found on a single cab. The great thing about hitting quality on every point is less frustrated and angry customers. I know I'm not asking for top of the line or most expensive stuff here. I've always appreciated your consumer-friendly priced approach, and your Atari Star Wars proves, with enough ingenuity and adding the right amount of quality into the crucial aspects of the cab while still charging a bit more, yields tremendous returns and a job well done from your customers. Now, having said that, I'm also not suggesting a bare minimum approach here. Many of us saw where a bare minimum approach led with your Attack from Mars virtual pinball machine. Sure, it functions, except the unusable nudge sensors and that one table at launch, but it runs graphically at an insufficient 720p resolution, which makes the graphics look pretty rough at a normal playing distance. And though the advertising says it runs at a full 60 frames per second, it doesn't really look that way, like it's dropping frames or something, an effect that's always had a harsh effect on my eyes if I play more than 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And one doesn't dare turn on any of the extra effects modes unless they want the performance to dip even further. I wish Arcade1Up could have taken real care with their VPin products like they did with Atari Star Wars. Attack from Mars could have been one of the greats if it was just supplied with a sufficiently powered PCB and acceptable functional nudge sensors. And if a decent PCB couldn't be sourced at the time, I for one would have gladly waited until one was, instead of getting a subpar, rushed version of the product just to compete in a newly opened device-type space. First impressions are paramount, especially when Arcade1Up hinted at the possibility of a future version 2 VPin during a trade show interview. But if you leave a bad taste in consumers' mouths out of the gate, they may not be interested in future helpings. And with Arcade1Up releasing these virtual pinballs at the most expensive price of any of their products at the time, to my recollection, some customers expected a higher quality. I know I did. And because it was already at the highest price point, I don't feel bumping it up another $100 or so to add in the appropriate parts would have been as major of a sticking point as Arcade1Up may have thought. And yes, my thoughts are just musings from a non-expert. But I know I would have paid an appropriate amount to get a great product in the end. And if retailers were the sticking point, Arcade1Up has, in the past, offered products directly from Arcade1Up proper via their website, a tried and true option. History shows with Arcade1Up Star Wars that people are willing to pay more for a premium product. Cutting corners only hurt Arcade1Up's VPin sales, not to mention raising the prices later to around $200 more for the same substandard product, which unfortunately doesn't leave me much hope for the future of the pinball line. But my fingers are crossed that Arcade1Up can learn from this mistake and put out a version 2 without cutting corners crucial to the experience, charge the appropriate amount, and make it a huge success. It's time for Arcade1Up to start repairing its less than favorable reputation due to actions deprioritizing quality and quality control. And Quell fostered community sentiments like, "Well, you must have just gotten a bad one," or "Since you purchased so many, you were bound to get a bad one eventually. You were just due." I want Arcade1Up to learn from its continued missteps and work to shake the perception to prioritize cutting critical corners in order to squeeze every little bit of couch cushion profit out of a product. Let's see all cabinets come with good quality in every area as standard. A cabinet you don't feel like you have to modify after you buy it. I'd bet you dimes the donuts, people besides me would be willing to pay more for a "you don't have to mod this one" edition of one of your 3/4 scale size machines. In fact, many of us already have, and I know I've said this several times already, with your Atari Star Wars cabinet. I paid that premium price of $499 for that kind of quality, the most I paid for any Arcade1Up product at the time. You gave us the total package of quality in all the points I mentioned. And if Arcade1Up still wants to offer lesser quality, but still acceptable, versions of their cabinets, I'm fine with that, as long as a full quality version is made available as well, and it doesn't have to be locked to a specific form factor, i.e. a Pro line. Let's have a quality version option for all form factors, including the 3/4 scale with riser versions. Put everything you got behind your incredible concept, and be the company who creates all their products with pride and care. Products that people can truly revel over. I'll put my wallet on the line if Arcade1Up brings that kind of passion to the table again. Now there is one thing I never have to worry about, something you always do get right with your 3/4 scale size riser machines: the structural integrity of the cabinet and its extension. It's crazy to think that lighter materials, which some might assume may be a detriment to a sound structure, can create such a solid product. Now the means to put all the pieces together could be much better. I'd prefer something like a cam lock system versus the horrible wooden dowel technique implemented. But the main structure, sans all the controls and electronic components, is very well built. Your cabinets are so sturdy and stable that I've never had to worry about them falling apart or tipping over. In fact, I've never had to use one of the included tip-over straps. And the ingenious decision to construct them in 2 separate pieces, a main cabinet portion and a separate, sometimes optional riser, makes the whole package so flexible, lighter, and easier to move and situate. This is the same 2-piece concept I experienced on my first emulation cabinet, employed by the company I mentioned earlier, Hanaho Games. It was the same idea, to make their machines more mobile, while raising them up to standard play height. But unfortunately, they used much thicker materials, which made everything still a bit too heavy. Arcade1Up got the formula down right and perfected the process. Bravo. And I also want to thank you for creating alternate form factors in your stand-up line, such as the XL, Pro, and Deluxe editions, one-piece machines made taller without the use of risers. Though these machines aren't necessarily for me, but you never know, those who do have an aversion to risers, or who feel extensions take away from a more authentic look, something more akin to a commercial design they remember from classic arcades, I'm glad they now have these options. For me, whether riser or no, I just see an arcade machine. Throughout my journey in arcades, I've experienced so many machines, in so many shapes and designs, that when Arcade1Up entered the arena, it was just a new model, a new exciting one. In those early days, and most often today, you make it a point to craft artwork to resemble what I remember from back in the day, making them look so authentic that I don't even notice the risers, and not one bit of nostalgia has ever been diminished. I've never once stepped into my arcade and thought, these aren't arcade machines. There be risers everywhere. Burn it to the ground. But everyone is not me. And I'm glad you continue to create new form factors to make more people's dreams come true. If Arcade1Up stuck with one formula, I wouldn't have my amazing Miss Pac-Man wall-mounted partycade today. Bring on the options. At the end of the day, consumer-friendly home arcade products for the average Joe are a reality now, and you paved the way. Thank you, Arcade1Up. Now I think it's about time for me to head down to my local arcade, to the next room, to my arcade, and free play my way to another high score. Safe travels, everyone, and remember, you always have a right to your opinion, but only I have a right to mine. Until next time, stay wiggly, my friends.